We often find ourselves at a crossroads between an everyday downhill slope of accepting more of the same and an uncomfortable upward path towards greatness. We often find ourselves falling flat on our faces with failed attempts, wondering why we take a few steps toward one direction so aggressively before inevitably turning around, compromising our potential, and choose the downhill. We speak proudly about where we want to be, but then remain silent on why we're not there yet. Maybe we realize we aren't quite prepared for that path. Maybe we didn't gauge that direction properly. We might tell ourselves something completely different. However, we failed to realize we needed to be a different kind of person, a better one. We do find ourselves filled with the drive at times to accomplish so much in our minds, but we have a hard time holding on to that power. We wake up the next morning wondering where it went and why even simple things become a challenge. Posing the question, how do we capture that lightning in a bottle? And how do we gain momentum with it? Welcome everyone. This is Busy, and I would like for you to join me for another video where I address the truths about motivation, its parts and its obstacles, and what we can do about it. I ask that you be humble, be open, because it is often our own neglect that hinders these processes, and we cannot move forward if we don't address it. I think where we can start is by identifying what it isn't and the common myths that are surrounding motivation as an emotion, as a feeling. One of the common things is that people think it's a forever thing. It's not. This isn't something you maintain. This is something you feel and you use and you weaponize for your own development, for your own growth. Another common myth is that without it, you may not be able to do anything or that you can't. A common excuse in society is that I didn't have the motivation to do it today. But in all reality, that's not how it works. Motivation doesn't work in a sense of consistency. It works in waves, and that is how it comes, in waves. And it is up to us to ride those waves to the best of our ability. Being that it does come in waves, and it's not something that remains, it is discipline that keeps it consistent, and it keeps us in line. Motivation walks hand in hand with the idea of discipline. And discipline can be seen as the consistency, self-implemented boundaries for the journey that the motivations start. So when you hear the idea of, I didn't have the motivation to do it today, they had the motivation to start the idea, but they didn't have the discipline to continue. That is our first thing that needs to be understood, because motivation is powerful. It is the urge and drive that gets us going. And that's powerful in its own way. Motivation in its entirety can be a sense of manifested potential, drives and urges that we have in a metaphorical means towards goals and dreams and versions of ourselves that we would like to pursue in some way, shape, or form. Motivation is also dictated by our level of discipline and how realistic we can be with ourselves in order to maintain that path and keep it sustainable. The thing that gets in the way is our lack of humility and an issue of comparison. The reason why we often fall flat on our faces when we decide to pursue something so aggressively, it is because we are making leaps and bounds and decisions based on a perspective of ourselves that isn't grounded in reality. We weren't being humble when we decided to pursue this thing. And so we did a mad dash sprint towards an idea of self that we weren't allowed to make because we were not that person yet. And that's the first issue that we come across. And this is why that our motivations often fail us. Not in the sense that we fail ourselves, but we decide to make a decision arrogantly in regards to ourselves, leading to a path that we couldn't maintain. That's not to say that we can't achieve greatness. That's not what's being said. What's being said is we need to make a realistic decision when we decide to pursue these motivations and when we decide to implement realistic disciplines in order to sustain it. We might often find ourselves comparing ourselves to others, which is the second issue and the most common one. We have social media that connects people all across the globe. And in this case, it doesn't help us. We find ourselves looking at what others have, looking how others are and how they are in their life. And we want to be like them. We want to have what they have. We want to look how they look. The sadness is that we can never be them, and we can never be that person. But at the same time, our own greatest power is that we can only be the best version of ourselves, and they couldn't be us any day of the week. They couldn't be us if they wanted to. And the sooner we accept that we are our own piece of work and that we are our own process, is the same moment that we can establish our own growth in comparison to ourselves. Because when we think that we can make the leaps and bounds that others have been constantly making, we haven't gauged their growth. And so it's no wonder that we fall flat on our face. It's no wonder that we fail. It's no wonder why we commit to journeys that we can't commit to, because we are making a measurement based on someone who isn't us. That's not someone who hasn't experienced the things that we've experienced, someone who isn't in the situations that we are currently facing, someone who doesn't have the weight that we carry. That isn't fair to us. And if we plan to use these motivations to our benefit, we need to ensure that we are looking at ourselves in our deepest, darkest mirror, instead of some electronic that connects us to others. That will never get us there. And we are the only person that can achieve that sense of movement for ourselves. And so the challenge that I suggest is to start aiming realistically. That is not to say that we put these ideas out of play completely. That is to say that we make realistic moves that we can achieve that do attribute to a greater success. The greatest part of ourselves is never going to come quickly, and we need to accept that fact. The sooner we accept that idea is the sooner that we can make concrete steps, a long journey towards the self that we do want and we'd be proud of and we would consider to be our best version. But there's no shortcut here. And that's why aiming realistically matters. Because if we decide to aim realistically and we decide to use humility as a compass for our motivations and our disciplines to be applied to those motivations, we will find ourselves moving. Maybe slowly at first, but that's compound growth. Everybody starts at a crawl, but that crawl turns to a walk. That walk turns to a run, and that run turns to a sprint. And we can't always think that we can sprint immediately. I believe in everybody's ability and potential to do so. But if we want to harness that potential, then we need to use it in consideration as to who we are as people. I don't want to see any more quitters. I don't want to see any more people giving up on their own potential. I understand that we often want to hold on to it. We want to hold on to the possibility of who we could be. And if that's not it, we speak on how unfair the cards we're dealt are. We think if we wake up tomorrow, somehow it will all change. We'll get new cards, and then we can begin. We create excuses to justify what we haven't done yet, like something else is responsible for why we haven't moved. This is all we got. My challenge to you is to change the narrative you have stuck in your mind that keeps you standing still. Change the idea that these aren't the cards you are stuck with. These are just the cards that you start with. This is just the beginning, and it is in our willpower to take us to what's next. Believe in yourself. Even if you're not proud of the truths your humility brings, believe in you. No one in a cape is going to show you. You have to don your own. Even if that means we don't have a direction at first. That's not what's important, but start moving. We will accrue wisdom slowly, learning as we go, and that will clarify what we are pursuing, and will improve universally the farther we travel. At the end of the day, you have a decision to make. Are you going to keep looking at that person you could be and remain as you are? Or are you going to start that journey and face the obstacles you have failed to address? I appreciate everyone that has stuck with me so far. I'm sure I brought up a lot of points that people are already aware of. But sometimes, even though that we are aware of such things in our worlds, in our environments, and we as people, it's always good to hear it out in the world, hear it out in the open, to affirm, to bring truth or shine light on things that maybe we know but we don't want to mention. And I get that too. It's easy to feel the urges and drives that come across, that zoom past us as we live our daily lives. And it's even harder to actuate them. It's even harder to turn them into gold, turn them into something. In today's society, it's harder to be disciplined. We have so many distractions, so many things getting in our way. And if we allow them to be monsters, they will be. And we can either turn our head and look away or address them before they become so. In this Q&A, I find it very simple to just bring up the term discipline. What is discipline, and why does it matter in regards to motivation? Discipline can be seen as an unconditional constant attributed to a person's conduct or consistency. It can be like the enforcer of boundaries that are set while pursuing goals or things in general. Motivation will come and go. It is our discipline that is a constant, and that is a matter of willpower of us, if we care to maintain it, and if we care to keep it going and not use excuses. Because it's easy to reach for an excuse. It's harder to not allow them. And if we do want to reach what our motivations are aiming for, then the discipline is the path that we can walk on. Just because we feel urges, eventually that urge will fade, and there's going to come days where we don't care to chase it anymore. But when we sit there in our own failures, and we sit there with the nothingness that we still have, we're going to wish that we did. And so we have to deal with the pain of discipline so we can avoid the pain of regret. With that being said, thanks again for everyone who watched the video. Please comment, like, and subscribe. And if you dislike the video, then dislike it, and you'll never see me again. But also comment in the comment section down below for any of your perspectives, any moments where you've had trouble in your life, any times where motivation and discipline has been an issue for you. I find these kind of things to be very common in our society. I know I have faced my fair share of monsters. And if there's anything that we can share in, it is a common struggle. It doesn't really matter what our end state is. It doesn't matter what our goals are, but we all know we have struggled along this route in order to achieve it. I wish everyone a happy new year. And for anyone that cares to, I ask that you try some of my suggestions just to see if it might work for you. We often try to pursue something more as every year passes to justify our existence in this world. And I challenge everyone to stop thinking about it. I challenge everyone to reflect on who they are and where they are, so that way you can pursue your own best version of you. That's all I have for today, and I'll go ahead, see you next time.